With rising inflation, bank failures, and massive layoffs across multiple sectors, the future of the economy remains uncertain. It's no wonder the central banks have been getting prepared by stockpiling gold. At ITM Trading, we have spent over 27 years building a team of seasoned researchers and analysts who can help you prepare for any financial crisis. Our experts are ready to provide you with proven strategies to safeguard your wealth and assets in the event of an economic downturn or currency reset, which is frankly inevitable. Don't wait until it's too late. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call by clicking on the link in the description below.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Black Swan Capitalist YouTube channel. Welcoming back a distinguished guest who has graciously agreed to join us for a part 2 and shed some light on the current economic challenges that we all face. We extend our gratitude to David Morgan from the Morgan Report for sharing his insights and expertise with us once again. Welcome, David, and thank you for coming back on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So in this ever-evolving world, we find ourselves facing a multitude of changes and challenges, from the decline of the dollar to the rise of inflation and mounting debt, and the global landscape is certainly witnessing a power shift towards the east. And in the middle of all of this, we have central bank digital currencies and an increasing intrusion of government interference in our lives. So we have so much to talk about. These forces certainly demand our attention. So I want to begin with considering the ongoing banking crisis and the potential consolidation resulting from raising the debt ceiling. So I want to know, how do you see this unfolding moving forward throughout the year, particularly in relation to the pressure that's being faced now by the smaller regional banks that are struggling to compete?
Yeah, I agree with what you implied, which is there's a lot of pressure to consolidate the banking industry. And so the bigger banks are gobbling up the smaller regional banks. One of my colleagues mentioned that, the regional banks may have a better balance sheet and not as many derivatives and that type of thing. In other words, they're safer than some of the money center banks. That may well be true from a balance sheet perspective. But the problem is that the powers that be run the show. And every bank is insolvent by the very nature of how the system is set up. It's a fractional reserve system. In the good old days, it was like 1 to 10. For every dollar that was deposited, you could load out, 9 more. Some areas, at some periods recently, there's been zero restriction. In other words, you didn't have to any reserves. Regardless, the reserves are pitifully small. The system is set up. It's aimed at more and more consolidation, so the bankers at the top have more control. That's the direction. Are there ways to mitigate it? Yes. Credit unions are one. Another one is stay in a regional bank. Don't let them kick you out. But a lot of this stuff is outside of our control. And the main thing is to have a discussion like this so people can think through options that we outline, or spark an idea that, oh, wait a minute, that gives me the idea. Maybe we could go different directions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, is insolvent as well.
Right.
There was a report on their latest data that came out not too long ago, and it was showing their reserve assets in comparison to the amount of depositors insured, and the ratio was totally off. Yeah.
Yes, they're insolvent. And the presupposition of myself and many others is that even though they don't have the insurance money to pay 1 or 2 large bank failures if they happen right now, that the Congress has the ability. This is true. This is a fact. I forget the limit, but the banks can go to the Congress and say, we need more money for the FDIC, and they can write a check or loan them the money or whatever. But even in that case, it's really not substantive enough to take care of an all-out banking crisis.
Sure.
So in other words, whether or not this $250,000 limit is sacrosanct or not remains to be determined. And this is something I said on a previous podcast, and it gets my engine fired up, is the biggest problem we have as depositors is the inconsistency of the system at large, because there were supposedly going to be no more bail-ins. It was illegal. You had to bail out, which means in the case of Signature, SVB, Silvergate, these other banks,
Yes.
at law, they broke it. And then they broke another one, and that is the 250,000 that you're insured for. They said, well, in this case, we will give you the 2 billion that's on deposit, not, taking that huge haircut. So I just want to give that warning, because those are our facts in front of us, which means if you're in a regional bank and a bank fails and the FDIC is broke, do you not get your 250? I'm not saying that's the case. I want everyone to think about it, because the inconsistency is what's the greatest fear. If you don't know what the rules are, and then they don't play by those rules, then where the hell are you? You're in a state of, I wouldn't say fear, could be fear. You're in a state of quandary. Is my bank safe? Isn't it safe? And all this. So this is the direction we're going. Of course, as you outlined at the beginning, the solution is to consolidate the hell out of it, have, one major bank, and it takes care of everybody. And
that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to do. And everybody doesn't get taken care of equally. Going back to one of my favorite, phrases, and, I'm fairly classically educated, believe it or not, even though I went through the public school system. But an animal farm, everyone's created equal, except some animals are more equal than others. So if you're an entrepreneur in the Silver Valley and you get your bank account deposit put up to what it was, well beyond the FDIC insurance, well, you're a special kind of animal. But someone else that's at a bank down the road that fails and they don't have the insurance, maybe you won't get your. So I'm not trying to scare anyone. I mean, the most popular video I've ever done was with Daniela Camboni on bail-ins.
Oh, she's great.
Years before anyone was really talking about it. And then a lot of people, and I'm not trying to take credit for it. Just fact is, it's the most watched video on Stansberry Research, 2.4 million views.
Yeah.
And yet my own channel, I got 44,000.
Actually, I've watched it.
For this video, which shows you how shadow banned I am. I mean, if a random interview can get 2.4 million views, and my own channel can only get 44,000 people to subscribe, that tells you something.
Yeah, definitely, because you're spreading the truth. You're waking up people too fast, and essentially, you're a threat to the system. Okay, they just want to keep you hush hush. That's really what they're trying to do, and they control the media. The big corporations, social media as well. So yeah, that's what they're attempting to do. So the shadow banning thing, I see that. It's so obvious.
I really think that the West right now is at a crossroad. It's the USA corporation versus the USA Constitution. You see that one seeks to tighten its grip on us with central bank digital currencies and just weaponizing the whole industry in every aspect of our lives, while the other seems to embrace a more decentralized manner and financial system as well, using technologies like XRP and other things out there. So we really are at this clash right now, and it's really the corporation and the Constitution, and that's, I think, what we're facing. It's pretty serious.
Yeah, I could pick up on that thread, and if guys want to edit this in or out, that's fine. So you're exactly right. We're at a constitutional crisis, a world crisis for freedom. And if you look at the law and what's been forced upon us, I will see it from that aspect. The federal enclave, the District of Criminals, DC, is not a state. State has superior rights to the district. The district was given very limited privileges or very limited power, but that's been turned upside down over the last 200 plus years. And what the federal government did some time ago is they created a federal zone on top of all the states. So at law, word for word, verbatim, it says they created a fictional state within a state. So if you're sitting in California, for example, it's got a designator of CA. That's a federal jurisdiction. So anyone that becomes a citizen of the District of Criminals, or DC, gives up their God-given constitutionally secured rights, and they turn them into privileges, which
and they don't even know it.
Good, except when it's a privilege. That means that the state has the power over you, which is exactly the reason that people can get in a panic about the fact that my kid in California can say they want to be something other than what they are. And if I resist it or whatever, I, the parent, can be held accountable by the state. Well, how does that work in a constitutional republic? Right. We started it on the foundation of our God-given rights that were secured by the Constitution. The reason it exists is to protect those rights. The federal government's purpose is to protect our God-given rights. So if you can't have sway over your own child, it tells you straight up, if you could think, that the state has more power than you do. And not only does it have more power than you do, it's taken away all of your basic freedoms. Everything that you think you have. So the deal is this: to create that nexus where they have that kind of power, they had to give you something for it. They've done it all legally, not lawfully, but legally, which means that if you run into their system and you become a registered socialist, then you're now a member of the federal club and you have federal citizenship, not state citizenship. So, and I'll whittle this down because like I could go on for 2 hours and most people don't even know what the hell I'm talking about, but it's such an important point. Definitely. So it's getting to the inflection. So I think, and you're already seeing it, where Montana says, F you, I don't care what gun law you pass at the federal level, states' rights supersede it, which they do when it was originally, written. And we're ignoring that. Or our citizens in our state of Arkansas have the right to determine whatever they want for their or whatever. But there, I remember hearing, and I've looked at this for years, but one of the ones that struck me as, is that possible or not, going back 15, 20 years, was a internal breakup of the United States going back to individual states and some staying on the federal side. I absolutely could see that now. The federal government in the U.S. and other places, I mean, it's pervasive throughout the world, more or less, is pushing their control mechanism further and further and further. And they're going to take it all the way to the ultimate if they could get away with it. And the only way to resist it on a individual levels, we've talked about can more, but to really have power, you've got to have more people involved. And that's where the states' rights comes in. And the state says, the hell with you, federal government. It's unconstitutional. We're not going to obey it, blah, 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 blah. And we're seeing that. So I'm belaboring the point, but it's now or never. I mean, I don't think we have 2 years left where we have a chance to push back hard enough where we can get our freedoms back. And it may be on the tipping point. Any men and women of good will resist to the bitter end because if you don't have freedom, what do you have? Right. You really don't have your life. They control it.
Yeah, and I've said this so many times that when societies lose their freedom, it's not because tyranny took it over, it's because people willingly gave it up. And that's why it's so crucial for individuals, especially now more than ever, to be actively engaged in all of this and to participate and understand these events unfolding, because something like this really could become a very uncertain future for all of us.
Well, one thing I'd like to interject, and this is not talked about very much, but let's say the bank's master plan or plan A and B fail. I mean, think about an all-out financial collapse where the banks close and they can't reopen. They don't know how. There's been a cyber attack or whatever. I mean, that's a possibility that very few of us talk about. We always make the presupposition that, there'll be a CBDC behind it, or they'll change the digital currency, or they'll put out new script, and all of those are possible, of course. But what if the powers that be actually lose control over the banking system? That would really be interesting. And of course, people would, like me, philosophically, idealistically, would be jumping for joy, but only on an idealistic level because of the ideology I hold about freedom and love and what the human experience is about. But the reality is that would be as bad as anything that could happen, because now all commerce stops. If you can't clear through the banks, what do? You barter. That's all you have left. Now, I'm not saying we're going there, but that is a possibility. Is it a 1%? Definitely. I don't know. But why don't we talk about that for a minute? How would you guys see it as young, very thoughtful men that have looked at this and continue to learn more and are open to all possibilities. What do you think?
Mendel,
Well,
you go first, and I'll share
well-
my thoughts after.
Well, David, my thinking is in alignment with yours right now, based on the direction we're moving in, the narratives playing out. Any one of those scenarios could be one of the cards they pull. However, though, the end goal, it looks like, is a destruction of the financial system so that they can reset it or have a new foundation and rebuild it. They have to, you already know this, they have to create a problem so that they could reset things and have a solution. And it has to be bad enough to where people are willing to accept it so that it looks like it's masked as a good thing in society's eyes.
Right.
And they have to have enough people on board to do that. So based on the narratives, we see, obviously, there's a currency war going on, banking crisis, liquidity issues. They've been pushing a cyber security, a cyber attack. They've been pushing that for, I think, over a year now. You know, the President Biden mentioned it. The World Economic Forum talked about it. You see small mainstream news channels discuss it here and there. 60 Minutes did something on it. You have little attacks throughout cities. So that's a narrative being played out. And in my opinion, based on everything and all the data I get my hands dirty on, I think the cyber attack is highly probable. I think it's really going to happen on a large scale, and they've been slowly hitting certain areas and building that narrative. That's what they're doing. And it's even possible that they come out with a new, I don't know if I should say this, but a new variant or something that is even more destructive that could actually affect people that have a shitty immune system. And you know where that goes. So there's all kinds of things that could play out. But the cyber attack, I highly think that's going to be one of the cards that's going to happen. I really do. And that could collapse the banks, because it could be a cyber attack on the financial system, and they could blame it on either country, or they could even blame it on the liquidity crisis.
Sure.
Yes. To carry on my brother's message, you know, we think alike, my brother and I, but I think it's also crucial to acknowledge that this rise of a cyber threat also poses not just the security risk, but the potential for big institutions to further exploit and weaponize all these systems around us. They're weaponizing the food industry, they weaponize the pharmaceutical industry, now they're weaponizing the financial system and information, not to mention. So they are certainly weaponizing these things that we use on a daily basis. That way they can get their narrative across. And the thing is, with digital currencies, I'll give you an example. If me and my roommate, for instance, I said, you know, screw Biden, or I don't want to vote for this guy, they're going to shut my bank account down. And my friend next door, my roommate, he's going to say, well, I don't want to get my bank account shut down, so I'm not going to say anything. Now the narrative is stronger. And I think that's the game they're playing at here. So it's, you know, it's something to be mindful of.
Well, what do you think, David?
Well, I can't really add on to anything. You already said the one thought I wanted to interject, but you already said it. It's a perfect cover, because the cyber attack, who done it, right? It'd be almost impossible. So it's just one of those things that happened, and we're here to reset for your own good. And, you know, so that's, I think, very high probability. I will give a shout out to my friend Petrea Patrick that did Black Start. It's a documentary. It's called Black Start. It's when the grid goes down, and if it goes down strong enough, it's impossible to start it back up in certain areas, which is a very scary thing.
It is.
So even the bankers must know this. I mean, they're far from stupid. They're just evil as can be. So it's going to be interesting to see how this comes to fruition. I think it will be a cyber attack, or at least part of it will be a cyber attack.
I think so.
Right.
If they don't plan it out correctly, they might not be able to reset, because if you can't get electrical power back up, you're screwed.
Well, I always believe that, go ahead.
No, please, no, go.
That they always plan ahead, because if they fail to plan, then they plan to fail. So they got the smartest brains from the best schools in the world. Yes, they can seem dumb at times, you know, but I believe for the most part, David, that's all a show. It's intentional.
Yeah.
That's what I think. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're way ahead of the curve.
Well, this topic, everything we're talking about here, and I'm going to be very honest about this, it's really just the surface of the conversation.
Sure.
There are topics we can't discuss here for many reasons, but this rabbit hole goes so much deeper. We're not going to get into that, but this brings me to my next question. And we've been getting a lot of information from our friends and our sources in our community. And I want to ask if you're familiar with this, but I want to know, what is the true nature of Nasara? Nasara is the National Economic Security and Recovery Act. And I want to know, how does this align? Because we're hearing a lot of information from military people as well. How does this align with the narrative of this white hat military operation that we hear about, trying to remove this cabal from power? Is that something that's really happening? Or
yeah, that's a very tough one. First of all, I'll address it in two parts. I'll address the Nasara part first. And there's Nasara and Jasara. You can look up on the internet. There's a lot of patriot groups that, in my opinion, give out disinformation. Some of it, I think, do it naively. They don't even know that they're giving out disinformation. They just find something on the web and they read it. And it's this source, here's the source, yada, yada, yada. So I took a deep dive in my private work, the Morgan Report Premium Service. And I dove deep on Nasara. And I went through the whole thing to the best of my ability. And what was very interesting, so my conclusion was, it's something that happened. let me reframe that. So I got done with the report. I got a feedback from one of my readers, and she claimed to be the wife of the gentleman that wrote up the Nasara proposal. Now, just because somebody emails me and tells me that, I can't guarantee that's true. However, what she had to say was pretty interesting. She said basically what's on the internet is pretty bogus to what the original intent was. And that bottom line is, it was a proposal. It's not at law. And the reason I could say with conviction it's not at law, when we went on that little rabbit hole about federal jurisdiction and how they put a federal enclave on top of the states and took over states' rights and all that, and they did it all quote unquote legally, not lawfully. Well, it's basically the same thing here. For that thing to be true, it has to be in the National Register. And if you go to the National Register, you won't find anything about Nasara. So this quantum financial system falls into the same lines. I think it's a distraction to give people hope that the patriots are in charge and that this is the way out. But one of my favorite expressions for you and anyone else listening is, you become an adult when you realize that the cavalry isn't coming to the rescue.
Exactly. Agreed. And I've said this many times to our sources, that this could be a massive psyop. And this is exactly what a former Mason told me. Told me that they present to you a hero because that's what you want. And that's how they get you. I really believe that this is a distraction strongly, because
to give people hope, like David just said. Yes.
Right. To give people hope. But I don't want to turn this into a religious thing, but I do believe in God, and I'm a moral person, and I understand the forces at play here, what we're dealing with. This is pure evil.
Yes.
So, it just confuses me. But
well, I want to come back in and answer the second part. So from my studied perspective, and all I know and have learned and taught myself on what is at law and what is not, Nasara's just BS. And the quantum financial system, I believe, is BS. But the second part of the question was military. And what do I think about that? That one's a much more difficult to answer, but I want to give you an answer because I know you value my opinion and others.
Definitely.
Plus, something I say may not resonate with you, but it will with one of the audience members. And then because of my inability to fill in the complete sentence, they take it from that base and move on and get more information. So it's hard to rule out that there isn't some military involved. I mean, if you go back to the election situation, and all these votes came in the last hours, and all of a sudden the residents, the president, and we watch going down, I think it was Pennsylvania Avenue, but at least in DC. And I'd say, and it's still, I think they may have taken it down, but 80–90% of the military basically turned their backs to the convoy of the presidential, I won't say parade, presidential
Fraud.
cars going down to, after the election. And there are things in the military that we're seeing with guys that do this kind of work. I study a lot. I can't know everything. I never will, but I do want the big picture. I want to fit the puzzle pieces together as the best I can. And you look at the amount of buildup in Gitmo from 2 years ago. That's an objective reality. I mean, that's something that, what do I think? No, there it is. And excuse me. So there is something to the military pushback. So I'll give you my 2 cents, and that's what it's worth, because I really don't know enough to add on to it, even though I will say a bit more. I think there is resistance. I think they have made progress in some areas. I think it's got some of the cabal concerned. But my take at this point in time is most of it's a psyop, and the military is not winning at this point in time. That's where I'm at.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Very interesting.
They have too much control. They have too many people in power that are on board with their agenda.
Exactly.
It's very
too
difficult.
Many woke generals. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
so
and
you might
leaders
have in the greater body a lot of good people. I mean, there's good people in the FBI,
definitely,
but the whole organization's corrupt. Remember the old adage?
Yeah, it's
one
true.
rotten apple spoils the whole barrel. That's the situation. You got
Same
one bad
thing.
apple at the FBI, the DOJ, I could go on and on, CDC, any 3-letter agency. And this is where, as you both said again and again, and I'll reiterate, is you've got to fight evil. That's what we're fighting. Oh, yes, it's the monetary system, and it's Nasara, and it's the quantum financial system, and it's the white hats, and it's all this. But honestly, it's speaking the truth always and everywhere, being proud enough to do it, willing to pay the price, and then see what the consequences are. And it doesn't take all of it. It really only takes a small percentage. But if no one stands up, we're doomed. We are totally doomed.
Totally. And I love what you do, David, and as well as what we do with the channel, because the goal is to spread awareness, share valuable data and information, and hopefully plant the seed in people's head to really question everything and think out the box so that they can put the pieces of the puzzle together and have a clear picture and better judgment. So that's ultimately the goal, and I respect what you do. So thank you very much. I did have a question, David.
Sure.
So let's talk about best practices for the average person to kind of prepare and protect themselves based on the current circumstances, the current environment, economically speaking,
Sure. Well, from a very basic level, and it's, I laugh because I talk about, fundamentals a lot. And I make the point that somebody as gifted and has worked as hard as when Michael Jordan, for example, still did the fundamentals. And who's better than Michael Jordan in basketball, So the fundamentals of a capitalistic system that works for you is live within your means. Live within your means. You make 10,000 a year, 50,000 a year, 500,000 a year, 5 million a year, whatever it is. You live within those parameters. But a lot of people are taught through the system that you don't have to save up for it. Buy it now. You've got good credit. So get that new car. You don't have to buy a 2-year-old car. Oh, get the department. Man, hell, furnish it with new furniture. I'll give you a credit line on furniture. In fact, we won't even charge you any payments for a year because we know you're putting together your car and your apartment, and you still got to feed yourself. And it's very enticing. So number one is live within your means. Number two is understand the monetary system. Don't have to understand finance. Don't have to understand stock trading or commodities trading or, what a whole life insurance policy is versus term life or any of the stuff that can run around in my brain. It's all about is it real or is it not?
Mhm.
Take up, one of these things. Is it real or is it not? I'm not a huge supporter of gold backs. I have quite a few of them. I give them out to conferences. But that's real gold money.
Yeah.
Whereas a piece of paper with some president's picture on it is really a lie. So once you understand the difference between currency and money, that's a foundation to learn where you should save. And if you have the ability to live with everyone, I think, well, most people, shouldn't say everyone, most people, I think, have the ability to live within their means, but not always. I mean, you could be destitute. I fully understand that. I'm very empathetic about it. In fact, it's taken me down a bit of a diversion, but the amount of tent cities in America, it just keeps growing. I mean, this is something that you don't get on the nightly news. It's how many people that were, middle managers or worked at Walmart for 15 years, or these aren't people that just don't want to work or don't have the desire to contribute to society. They just basically cut out by one way or another. So coming back on point, live within your means, get your expenses down. I've said this often, and it's corny but really good. If you're a 2-car family and now you're working from home or whatever, get rid of that second car. Yeah, it's more cumbersome, but geez, the insurance, the maintenance, the cost, putting tires and brakes on and all that. Most people, most households, I would say most, I don't know what percentage.
Yeah.
But
That's a liability.
A lot of households out there that could get by just fine on one car. They don't need
definitely.
Yeah. Well, in the US, I noticed, and this is spreading throughout the world, is that this, especially in the US, the culture is like to live above your means,
Yeah.
And I keep telling people in these uncertain times, it's so important to recognize the significance of owning physical assets, including water, food. You have to be prepared because this is going to give you that layer of security. And, because you can't trust your government.
Peace of mind.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to rely on them for your water. It's probably going to be poisoned. I keep reiterating this on every video I put out. Get some gold, get some silver, own some physical assets, because that is going to save your life. It's very possible. If this thing goes down, people are going to be in big trouble, and your neighbor could be your worst enemy at that point.
If you really think about it, how you could be of maximum service to others, meaning your next door neighbors and your family, what's more important than water? Well, it's air. But if you were to put some of your savings into these water filter pitchers or these straws or whatever, you'd be a hero. And it would serve 2 purposes. One is to get all your neighbors, you buy, 50 of them, be able to drink clean water, but also gets them off your back. In other words, it's, you could give a fish away or you could teach someone to fish, but it's an idea of mine, just random, came off the top.
No, I think it's great. Yes.
That's a good use of capital in these times. Getting a better
definitely.
watch, or getting a better tie, or getting a new shirt, or any of these things that we're programmed to do is superfluous now.
Yes.
What needs to be done is your basics, and make sure you have them covered. And I've got like 3 different water purifiers. One is pen light, and then I've got the straw, and then I've got a pitcher. And I'm on a well, so I don't even need to do anything. But
you're just prepared.
Yeah. And that's important. So Gregory Mannarino have a clip from this morning. This is regarding the IMF creating a digital currency. And I just want to play it out, let you hear it.
A lot of chatter everywhere right now regarding the implementation of some kind of a global currency, central bank issue, and people are just not liking it. The real question you and I, should be asking ourselves is, if people, you and me, and I would be willing to bet most people are opposed to this. They don't want a central bank issued digital currency. Why is it that so-called governments are pushing this on we, the people? Well, let's just establish a few facts here. Number one, this is central banks who are pushing this. It's not government. Central banks collectively are the government. Once you realize that, then maybe it'll become a little more clear to you. That's fact number one. Fact number two, is what's really behind all this control.
Are you familiar with this new IMF global CBDC they're trying to come up with? It seems like that they're trying to weaponize the crypto industry, and this kind of ties into the William Hinman emails. We'll get into that here in a sec. But it seems like a few people are trying to weaponize the industry, bring it down so they can introduce their alternative.
Right.
It would be
Problem,
blockchain
reaction,
technology.
solution. Yeah. Problem. We need a new financial system. Reaction. The free market comes up with cryptocurrencies. Problem, reaction, solution. Solution, it's money laundering. They're bad guys. They're insolvent. We have to take it over and make it right for everybody. And by the way, if we're just going to go nation state to nation state, it'd be far more efficient to do it on a global basis. And therefore, the bankers bank, the IMF, is the way to go. So I don't want to add on a couple more. And depends on where I'm lecturing and what the topic is, because I speak, macroeconomics. Of course, I speak about the metal, sometimes specific resources. But regardless, I think it was the Red Pill conference I did a few months back. And I've got the permission, and I probably wouldn't need it, but I got permission to use one of the slides from the movie Thrive, Foster Gamble. And he's got the pyramid in there. And what's so interesting about the pyramid is this is what I call how the world really works. If you look at the pyramid, at the bottom of the pyramid is the animals and the people. So that's kind of even underneath the pyramid. Then the next layer up is government. So everyone thinks government's all powerful, and not that they can't ruin our lives or make us miserable, but the lowest on the pyramid is government. And what's above government? Corporations. And what's above corporations? Commercial banks.
Banks.
What's above those banks? Money center banks. And what's above that? The IMF, the World Bank. And what's above that? The BIS, the Bank of International Settlements. So it's a very clear, and I like the picture's worth 1,000 words. When you see it on the big screen, it's easy to follow what I'm saying. I'm sure our viewers understand what I just said. And you can look it up. Look up the Thrive Pyramid of Power or whatever. I'm not sure the exact name.
Yeah.
And that's just how the world really works. So corporations control basically everything at our everyday lives. But above that, it's the banking system that controls the corporations. Because if you are a corporation that's a zombie corporation, you pay dividends only because you could borrow money from the bank to give out the dividend, because you're so freaking insolvent, you don't have the cash flow to pay any dividends because you're not making a profit. You're an anti-capitalist in a way. You're just sucking money. But if you have the right relationship and that banking entity or entities want you in business for whatever reason, just to draw capital away from someone else, whatever the reason, it will stay alive. But in a true free market, it'd be dead a long time ago. You're not making a profit. You sell out your assets to the bondholders at front of the big money in the beginning, and you get your 20 cents on the dollar or whatever. That's not what's happening. So the whole system is run by the banks. And I don't get into the minutia, because is it, this brand of banker or that brand, or was it from the Jesuits, or was it from the Catholics, or was it from the Jewish sector, or was it? They're all involved.
Yes.
Every one of these nationalities has been corrupted at the level of how the monetary system works.
Right.
And it's all about
Exactly.
as Greg Manarino said. He looked really good. I haven't watched any videos of it recently. And very smart guy. It was a lot of fun.
He is.
His hair is getting whiter, though. I feel like he's under a lot of pressure. It's funny because I'm only 29 years old and my hair is starting to turn white too. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to be like these guys soon. David, I wanted to ask now, I don't know if you've actually examined the Hinman documents or whatever did come out from them. I looked at them. I put a video out the other day on it, and it really just reveals that, of course, big institutions were involved, and they're the ones paying the bonuses and the salaries to the senators. So it's the senators who are perpetrating the delay of the innovation so that they can weaponize the system. What do you think this is going to look like moving forward for XRP? Because we thought that after these Hinman documents were going to be revealed, maybe we would start to see some institutional utility, maybe some regulation, but none of that happened.
I don't have a great deal of thought behind it. What I see obviously is that the XRP continues to march forward regardless of what's pushed up against. And I see more and more usability for the banking system. So as I've said in the past, and I'm not sure, maybe it's invalid to say this again, you can correct me, that I think it's here to stay. And I think it will be utilized. And I think it's the banker's vehicle of choice to do settlement outside the SWIFT system. Something definitely.
I agree.
So I think when you don't get resistance, or you don't get pushback, or you don't get commentary, that's usually a sign that the big guy in the room that doesn't speak at a meeting in China has got it under control. And he's told his underlings that they can't say a damn thing yet. I think that's where we're at.
Yes.
Probably non-disclosure agreements. I've sent out many emails to big figures, including Judy Shelton. I had discussion with her, and I was trying to get a show. She said, sure. Then she asked for a list of questions, what topics we wanted to talk about. And when she saw XRP in there, there was a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Yes. And not only with Judy, we've sent out numerous
Nomi Prince from
emails
Goldman Sachs
to notable individuals within the finance sector and, certain individuals within government. And we've got responses, polite responses. But as soon as we send the questions over, which it's nothing has to do with the COVID, it has nothing to do with Nasara. As soon as we mention XRP, we get no response, or we get a response politely declining the interview. So there's something to be said about that. That's not a coincidence. It's hilarious, really, because it's such a consistent pattern we see when we reach out to people. But yes, XRP, it looks like we're at the final stages now, and it's definitely being deliberately delayed. It's all a show, in my opinion. Nothing's changed with the fundamentals. As you said, they're still marching forward and growing. And yes, they have a big role to play. Another thing is the Ripple was actually on the IMF advisory board. There's a whole report on that.
Yeah.
It never got mainstream attention.
Well, I don't pay attention to the lawsuit, and I've said this, many of our viewers are listening, and I tell them that me personally, I don't care what happens with the lawsuit. I know how this is going to unfold. We've seen this many times in the past. They sue it, they delay it, they try to get people away from it, they try to control it, and then they integrate it into their system.
And adopt it.
When these Hinman documents even came out, I really didn't care. It's like, okay, this is the same old, but just for the sake of discussion, people want to hear about it, so.
Well, did you have any more questions that you want to ask, David?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask about, you've seen the Pentagon. They now, this morning, I think this news about the 6.2 billion aid to Ukraine. First of all, if we had blockchain adopted already, like XRP, that 6.2 billion, the accounting error would have never happened. So it's kind of funny. And then I want to ask for your opinion on this Ukraine war, because a lot of new information is coming out on what's happening in Ukraine. I don't want to get into too much of the details, but why are we continuing to fund this with our tax dollars? And, what's really going on over there? When is this going to end? I mean, our America is in ruin, and we have so many domestic issues here, yet we keep giving our tax dollars away to Ukraine. And then BlackRock, all of a sudden today, they got some big contract with Ukraine to rebuild it. I don't know if you saw that too.
Yeah.
You have any
thoughts
on
thoughts? Yeah.
Ukraine war?
So you asked me earlier about Nasara, and I went and did the whole, research thing and did a report and gave it to my premium members. And in fact, when I did that, I have got some of the most hostile feedback from my paid members that I had. Not a lot of them, but a few of them. And one guy just said I was out of my freaking mind, and he quit. He thought he had respect for me. He's lost it all. Goodbye. But, I call him as I see him. Plus, I base as much as I possibly can on fact. So, coming back to the Ukraine situation, I wrote a paper for the Morgan Report on that topic when the war first began. Yeah. And I titled the article, or the summary, "All Wars Are Bankers' Wars."
Agreed.
So I wanted everyone to realize
100%.
that the basis of war is the banks are going to win regardless of what side loses.
It's good for business too.
The second thing to be cognizant of is the number one loss in war is the truth. That's the number one casualty, is getting the truth out of anybody on either side. They both lie.
Yeah.
And
right.
so I went on and talked about Russia's place in this war and where I saw it. And it's not the popular view, but I think it's the absolute most accurate view. Okay. And that is that the Ukraine is the biggest money laundering capital of the world. Mm-hmm. They have been doing their bio research in Ukraine. The fact that we have the criminal class that's basically running the world, mm-hmm. viably placed in positions of power that are nonetheless known corrupt entities. So you've got Nancy Pelosi's family member over there. You've got Mitt Romney's family member over there. You got Joe Biden's family member.
They're all connected.
And they're all working in Ukraine. And so the backup on it, it's come to my head. It's been a while when I wrote this article. But, you know, the Minsk agreement was pretty clear. And what really pisses me off as an American is our inability to do what's the most important thing to do. The two laws: do everything you say you're going to do. Law number one. And two, don't infringe upon the rights of anyone else. But every treaty we've seemed to have ever made, we've broken it. I mean, this one with Ukraine, we broke it. The U.S. broke it. Yeah. It wasn't Russia, it was us. But very few people will even, you know, they'll turn off the program now or whatever. I don't care. The truth is all powerful.
And the data is there.
And the data is there. So yeah. I think it's a continuation of, you know, keeping the fat cats that are the criminal element running the planet alive and well. And this, if I could digress a moment, goes back to, well, what do you think about the white hats? And I think they exist. I just don't think they have the level of power that we'd like to believe, or at least I'd like to. I'd like to believe that, you know, this is the biggest sting operation in the world, and all these criminals are going to get put in jail.
Yeah,
have military tribunals because, you know, these guys were treasonous to the United States. But common sense tells me that's not the direction. Yeah. I mean, if some, let me back up. The way the system is set up once upon a time was it's the same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone. Same rules, same laws, same accountability for everyone. The highest place you can be as an American is an American citizen. That's higher than vice president of the United States. But if somebody was vice president of the United States and they committed or broke the rule or broke the law, the punishment on them would be identical to the punishment on me, because it's the accountability for everybody under the republic to be treated the same. That's the rule of law. Mm-hmm. There is no bias. But when you see, you know, so many examples, but the most recent being, you know, somebody gets their hand slapped and somebody gets, you know, really reprimanded for something that's probably less of a crime, it shows you how, you know, how broken the system is. The system is totally broken. That's another thing about, you know, when you're an adult, when you realize the cavalry is not coming to the rescue. Mm-hmm. This is why you've got to get your own food storage. You got to get your own water filters. You got to be more friendly with your neighbors. You got to get maybe a side hustle. I don't like that word, but, you know, if you can forge, or you can sew, or you can garden, or fix cars, that'll be a big one. Mm-hmm. Any of those things, because if this economy breaks down to the level where it could, and it doesn't have to be ubiquitous, it doesn't have to be always and everywhere. It could just be in pockets where, you know, Eastern Kentucky's out of power and won't get it back. And so they've got to go more rural or whatever. So I don't want to digress too far, but the point is, you need to be more self-reliant. If you think anyone in the government at this point has your best interest at heart, I'm praying for you. That's all.
It's naive to believe. And every 80 to 100 years, as Ray Dalio stated before with data to back it up, there is a fall of empires, and whether that's with the currency or just society itself, there is a reset. And it looks like, obviously, based on everything happening, we're living during that time. This era will go down in history books. We're living through a reset right now.
Yeah. And one thing I would like to add is that in our comments, sometimes we get a lot of people saying, when is this going to happen? When is the reset going to happen? I'm like, we're living through it already. And the fact that people believe that there is a cavalry coming to save them is going to put them in a worse position. I think so, because that mentality,
it's naive.
I've always been the one to say, you're going to save your own ass.
Yeah. You're going to have to.
And maybe your family too. That's about it. But
yeah. Well, going back to the CBDC, and I made this point once or twice, and I actually got a favorable comment, which I do get favorable comments, but
I know you do. Yeah.
To reiterate what you said, you don't need a CBDC to control the citizenry. Canada is the perfect example. These guys put on a peaceful protest.
And they shut them down
against the illness situation, and their bank accounts get slammed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's without a CBDC, which shows you the kind of power and control these bastards have.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that we can't, my proposition has been we take the money in our own hands. And, to go down that road for a couple of minutes, the old adage that he who owns the gold makes it. Well, under a gold coin or a gold standard or a partial gold cover clause, that's pretty much true. But who owns the gold? Well, the central banks own it. But if you take it one step further and say, he who owns the silver makes the rules, and you realize the central bank holdings of silver is really nil, the bullion banks hold their amount. But if we could get the real power, which is silver over gold, because you can't do anything in the modern world without silver. You can have a computer, a TV, a cell phone, you can't do anything.
Yes, you're right.
So if we put all the power in the people's hands and started using silver as a means of exchange between us on a voluntary basis, you want fiat, you want gold, fine. But then you would have some real power. And that's been, of course, my objective all along, not to necessarily be connected to the company I'm involved with that's doing a digital backed gold and silver coin, but the idea of it. And it has a chance. I don't know how big a one, but we can get these systems working in parallel. And I'm going to do, I don't know if it's going to be a series. It probably will be like 3 interviews on the topic of, what is security and what isn't, and how do the commodities fit into this? Because when we started the Load project, we did it out of Crypto Valley in Switzerland at the time, and I think it's still true. It's one of the best brain trusts as far as how this crypto thing is going to play out in the long term.
Well,
so it's not the solution, but it's a tool in the kit of living within your means, buying stuff you need, hunkering down and learning skills and being more self-reliant.
And
here's an opportunity to, and there's a part of it, I'll just go on. If you're a merchant, which I am, you can be in the system, the Load system, and say, if you pay me in silver, the cost of the Morgan report is a 20% discount. It work across the board. I mean, it could be for dental work, it could be for travel agent, it could be for, teledoctor or whatever. So we just need to get the word out, and we need to get viability. And the way we're going to get it is by getting more involved. And it's very difficult. Running an internet business as I have is a little more cumbersome than most people think. I mean,
it can be challenging, definitely.
Put up a website and away you go and just count the money at night. It's not quite how
it's a challenge. Trust me, I know. It's we try to operate the same way, so we understand.
There's one thing I wanted to share. This is kind of funny, actually. There was this guy, YouTuber, he was in New York City and was asking people with an offer of 100-ounce bar, silver bar, or a Snickers bar. Everyone went for the Snickers. That just shows you how people don't really understand the monetary system and how important that, that is.
What real money is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Well,
I
that-
just
That was probably Mark Dice, and he did it more than once. In fact, I think one time he was in front of a coin dealer in Encino with the candy and the silver, and he told the girl, "Walk in there. I'll stay here. You walk over there and ask this guy what a 10-ounce bar of silver is worth, and then you come out and you make your choice." And she's so freaking lazy, she wouldn't do it.
Oh my
It's
God.
just, well, if I didn't know the answer and there's an answer walking, 80 feet, I'd freaking do it. I mean, that's on my mind. Just like, hey, guy out here giving me a choice between what's silver worth? Oh, it's worth $25 an ounce. You mean that little bar of 10 ounces is $250? Yeah. Well, could I sell it in here? Yeah, you could. Go back out and make make
Yeah, I know.
yeah, I'd run 3 miles for a silver bar that big. All right, man. Well,
Well-
David, is there any last thoughts or things you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think my last thoughts are that globalism is on the decline. I know that's a contrary point of view, but if you're having a Ukraine-Russia war and you've got the neocons looking to escalate this into perhaps a nuclear situation, that's not pulling the world together. That's pulling it apart. So I think there are enough countervailing forces versus this total evil that they're perpetuating on the planet. There will be pushback. And
Definitely.
it's not determined yet. And if you're really free, that means you have the right to self-determination. All you have to do is do everything you say and not infringe on the rights of anyone else. It's that simple. There's 2 rules. And I think we're going to get there at some point. I don't see the cabal winning in the long term. But in the short term, unfortunately, what I see is a lot more trial by fire, less food, less things you took for granted a few years ago. Maybe you've got plenty of money, but you're only allowed to go to the movie theater once a month because it's only fair, or who knows? I mean, they're micromanaging us to the point of, what we buy, what we eat, how much meat we can have, how much our carbon footprint is, and on it goes. And it's just absolutely.
That's got to stop. It's got to stop. We have to stop this. And
that's something we could definitely talk about in more detail hopefully if we can do this again with you, David, get more into depth on that side of things. Yeah,
sure.
It goes deep. So, and I know you have a lot of information on that.
Yeah. And I've got a team, people say, well, David sounds smarter. He sounds dumb, or he's wrong. And I surely make mistakes. I'm human, but I have a lot of help too. I'm pretty
Definitely
with the industry, especially the alt people like Gregory Manarino. I mean, he's in my cell phone. I haven't talked to him in a while. And, more often than not, I want to be right because I don't want to give out any disinformation or misinformation. So I'll call up a Greg or whatever and, hey, look, the way I read this says this. Can you verify it? Or have you heard it? Can you verify this or that? And then, of course, I guess I'll leave with this. One of the most profound things you could say if you're really intellectually honest with yourself is, I don't know. In other words, well, what's your opinion on Zelensky's latest hairstyle? I haven't seen it, so I can't form an opinion. In other words, you do not have to have it. In fact, if you're really intellectually honest, you want to say, well, I have an informed opinion on the election, and state your piece. But just to grab on to some narrative that some talking head that's paid by the deep state and regurgitate it because you've been mind bent or mind controlled, and to have an automatic Pavlov's dog response to a very honest and needed question, we are going to have a fate that in a way we deserve. And I say that because if you're born free, and if you do not take the responsibility of self-governance all the way or to the best of your ability, and you just rely on the thoughts and opinions of others rather than form your own intellect in order to determine for yourself what is true, you almost deserve it.
I agree. And that's what we do here. We try to wake people up and allow them to seek the truth and think for themselves. Think outside the box, look at everything and ask the right questions. So, yeah. Well, again, thank you very much, David. Always great chatting with you. We're going to do this again, hopefully, if you can, in the very near future. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you again, David.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. Take care. Bye. Bye.